Hello my friends, today is a very good day. With all the online hubbub of the 2024 Mustang, I thought it only fitting to talk about the man behind the Mustang. The man who saved Chrysler, the guy that saw the grand potential in Jeep, the gentleman who introduced the minivan, the man, the myth, the legend, Lee Iacocca. So, let's do it. If you are not familiar with this channel, I like to drop a automotive history video every week. If that's your cup of tea, press subscribe, press like, and if it's not, that's fine too. Now let's begin our journey through history. But first, look at my beautiful 1965 Mustang Fastback. Naturally, we're going to be talking about the man whose brainchild was the Mustang. I needed to incorporate my Mustang. Okay, we continue on. We need to start from the beginning. Lee was born Lido Anthony Iacocca in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. He was born to immigrant parents who came to the States pursuing the American dream. Lee really honed his interpersonal skills, his customer service, his sales, and his marketing while working as a youth at their family-operated hot dog shop named Iacco's Hot Dogs. You might be wondering, where did the name Iacco's come from? Well, it was kind of a spin-off on the absolute butchering the Dutch Pennsylvanians in the area did to Iacocca. So from Iacocca, it went to Iacco's. They still actually have 5 Iaccos in the Lehigh Valley region, and if I'm ever back there working again, you best believe I'm gonna go, because I love hot dogs, and I love Lee Iacocca. And another very formative first job experience for Lee Iacocca was working at one of the nation's first rental car companies called You Drive It. And at You Drive It, most of their fleet were Fords, and that's where he got his love of Ford. At a very early age, Lee Iacocca understood the value of hard work and education. He did so well in high school, he left there with a fellowship to Princeton, and then he would leave Princeton with a master's in mechanical engineering. Now get this, while he was at Princeton, he did manage to get a verbal guarantee to be one of the 50 candidates going into Ford at Dearborn, Michigan. But he just didn't want to go until he finished his master's in mechanical engineering. Now, this is where it gets tricky. Once he graduated, he reached back out to Ford. They said, "We don't know what you're talking about." The gentleman, the executive that had promised him that position, had been drafted into the military. Like only a charmer like Lee Iacocca could, he talked Ford into allowing him to be the first and only ever 51st candidate. And now Ford said yes, he could be the 51st candidate if he could make it to the orientation, which was like the next day. And Lee made it by the skin of his teeth. And it was in 1946 that Lee began his relationship with Ford as an engineer. But it was very quick that Lee realized that he was more of a salesman and a marketing genius, and he quickly asked to go into the sales and marketing department. You see, Lee's big dream was to become the president of Ford, and he just didn't think he could do that stuck in the engineering department. Within 10 years, Lee would take his failing California dealership to the top. He would get a lot of attention from Ford and consumers with his 56 for 56 campaign. What exactly was the 56 for 56 campaign? Well, for all 1956 models, you could pay 20% down and only $56 a month for 3 months. It did so well that Ford ended up adopting that campaign and using it across the nation. And really, it was that campaign that got Ford's attention so much that he began moving up the ranks at Ford. And I mean fast. Within 4 quick years, Lee Iacocca would be named Vice President and General Manager of the Ford division. Under his leadership, you would see the development of the Mustang, the Ford Escort, the Continental Mark III, along with the revitalization of the Mercury brand, which would introduce the Cougar and the Marquis. And really, it was the Mustang that was a huge success. You see, Lee had really got the timing right with the market. He knew the baby boomers were about to come of age. They wanted something with style. They wanted something that wasn't going to break the bank, and they wanted it to be reliable. Within 2 years, the Mustang had sold 1 million units. And to this day, the Mustang is the 5th best-selling nameplate of Ford. Now, Lee's time at Ford was not all sunshine and success. During the entire time, he was also butting heads with Henry Ford II, which would then lead to his eventual dismissal. The Deuce just basically said he didn't like Lee. But what I don't think the Deuce realized is he was handing off one of his best executives wrapped in a bow tie to another automaker. You see, Chrysler had been pursuing Lee, and they were finally going to get him. It wasn't just Lee that was going. He was bringing former associates from Ford and basically building Chrysler from the ground up. Within a year of his time at Chrysler, Lee realized that Chrysler was not going to make it unless he had a substantial jolt of cash. And with that, he approached the United States Congress for a loan guarantee. Now, getting that loan was not easy, but I'm not going to dive quite into that. As long as Chrysler was willing to reduce costs and cut a few of their lingering projects, they would get the loan. Unfortunately, one of those lingering projects that had to get cut was the turbine engine, which is super cool. All right, they had been working on that for over 20 years and was expected to actually reach consumers within that year. I did get to recently at the last car week, this is 2022, got to see a Chrysler Gia turbine coupe, and it was pretty cool, man. Those things sound wild. They can run on jet fuel, they can run on perfume, tequila. Pretty cool. But Chrysler had to cut it. Right, now Chrysler has some fresh cash in their pockets. What do they begin? Producing the K-Car series. Most of you have probably heard of the K-Car series because it's essentially what saved Chrysler. Something to note, the K-Car series and the idea of it, Lee had actually taken to Henry Ford II, and Henry Ford II, the Deuce, shot it down. The Deuce also shut down the Minimax project, which we're about to talk about in a second. But first, if you're not familiar with the K-Car platform, let me tell you a little about it. Well, it was an automotive design platform featuring a transverse engine, front drive, independent front and semi-independent rear suspension, and very importantly, it was a platform that was able to share many parts between each cars. Sharing common parts was important. You see, Chrysler had already been sharing a few platforms, but they had way too big of an inventory of parts. Iacocca thought a big part of Chrysler failing was the vast number of parts in inventory and the complexity of building so many different versions of cars. Keeping it simple, it always works. And within a year, Chrysler was able to pull a $10 million profit with the K-Car series. Now, I had kind of already mentioned it, but another project that Lee brought over from Ford, because he kind of got the door shut on him with it, was the Minimax, which the Minimax project would become the noble steed of soccer moms. It would become the minivan. And the minivan would go on to lead the automobile industry in sales for 25 years. And because of the K-Car series and the success of the minivan, Chrysler was able to pay back the government their loan 7 years before expected. And in 1987, Lee Iacocca would lead the acquisition of AMC. What he saw was a grand opportunity with the Grand Cherokee. Though the Grand Cherokee would not be released till 1992, which was also the year that Lee Iacocca decided to retire. Retirement wouldn't really last too long. In 1995, he would join up with Kirk Kerkorian, I don't know if I'm saying that name right, to lead what many called a hostile takeover over Chrysler that didn't work out and left Lee with a gag order not to talk about Chrysler whatsoever publicly, and then led me to go down a rabbit hole about Kirk Kerkorian, who, anyways, I'm not going to go there, but very interesting. Then, 10 years later, Lee was back acting as Chrysler's pitchman alongside Jason Alexander and Snoop D-O-double-G. That marketing campaign was obviously a success. But what I like the most about it is that in compensation for his appearances, Lee just asked for $1 for every car sold that year so that he could put that towards the Lee Iacocca Foundation for Type 1 Diabetes Research. You see, Lee Iacocca's first wife died from complication of type 1 diabetes. Now, Lee had a lot of other plates spinning besides just being one of the most key players in modern automotive arena. He also founded a e-bike company. He was on the board of MGM Grand, and to get this, he created his own olive oil company, Olivio Premium Products, which you can probably find in your grocery store today. On that topic of Olivio, every cent of profit from that olive oil company goes to his type 1 diabetes research foundation too. He also headed the fundraising efforts for the Statue of Liberty when it was in major disrepair, and he also almost ran for president. And that would have been real cool if we had had Lee Iacocca as president. Oh man. Apparently, so it's in 1988, which was first Bush and Dukakis running, and Tip O'Neill, who was a politician at the time, talked Lee out of it. There were polls taken at the time, and Lee had a very, very realistic chance of taking the win. Lee Iacocca would pass away July the 2nd, 2019. It's very clear he lived a very full life. What do you think was Lee's biggest success? What do you think was Lee's biggest failure? Are you gonna go Google Lee Iacocca Snoop Dogg commercial? Cause you should. Alright guys, well, thank you for enjoying this informal little history tidbit. I love these, hope you love them too. If you do, press subscribe, press like, and if you don't, that's fine too. But I'm gonna go have a beer now. Bye!